moon, and I will share some slides with you. Until we get to the story, I would like to say that we have, since time immemorial, people looked at the moon and wondered about it and drew it, and we have ancient Egyptian from 5,000 years before the BC. People looked at the moon and drew things on temples from them. So human beings were always fascinated by the moon and by the what it looks like and what not. And let me see. Let me see now whether I can share the slides. So we have the first map of the moon from Galileo in 1610, way back. And he's looked at the moon and he, with a microscope, with a telescope, and he said there are round black areas that are flat. And he thought they were seas and called them maria, which is seas in Italian. And the areas that are high, he called them terra, as highlands in Italian. And therefore, we have these two divisions, that these round, flat things they call maria, which are flat, and the next ones are the terra. Then we came with Jules Verne, who said thought about a mission to the moon, and he thought of 3 people riding in that shape of the spacecraft, reaching the moon, and making notes and whatnot. So he also started with three things on the moon. Now I'll go back. Oh. That went too fast for me, so I'll get them back to you. So because there are some of these things are rather important, so I'll get back to them and talk about them. Then came 1957, the 4th of November 1957, when the Soviet Union sent the very first spacecraft that rotated around the Earth. The first thing that went into space was called Sputnik and started going around the Earth. And that terrified the whole world, especially the United States of America, whereby they thought, my God, what is this spacecraft doing up in space? We don't have anything there. Is it taking pictures of us? Can they send bombs to hit us? What is the story? So they were terrified. And that's 1956. 1958, 1 year later, they established NASA. And they have a great man to lead that NASA called James Webb. And James Webb was a head of NASA for only like 7 years. He didn't even was there for the Apollo 11 mission, but he established NASA and established the workforce. And Jim Webb, as a leader of any group, would go and visit all the supervisors of every group, of every place in NASA, and meet with the top leaders of each and every group. And he will tell them the following. If you're able to get from every person that works for you all they think they are capable of doing, we shall surely fail and we will never make it to the moon. And he will let them think about what he said for a minute. And then he says, however, if you're able to get from every person that works for you more than what they think they are capable of doing, then we will make it to the moon. So that was something super fantastic. Now, NASA, he established the fact that the most important thing is the rocket that will go from here to the Earth to the moon. And he looked up the German, the rocket expert that actually worked for Hitler with rocketry, and he would made rockets to go from Peenemünde in Germany all the way to England and hit London and so on. And he was captured by the Americans and he brought to the US, and then he became the director of the Marshall Spacecraft Center, where the rocket Saturn V was being prepared. And this particular man was excellent in supervising all the work for the rocket, and he is the one that's responsible for making the rocket be able to carry all the weight that's necessary for the spacecraft that will go to the moon. So Werner von Braun, that's his name, was the essential component of that thing. The third essential component was the Apollo program director on the right there, Apollo director Rocco Petrone. He was an incredible manager. He knew exactly what to do. I worked in his office in that NASA headquarters, and he would call me up and he say, Farouk, there is something wrong in Houston, Texas, and I don't want to get to talk to the big guys. They will not tell me the story. Go tomorrow and find out who exactly is doing that job. So I fly immediately to Houston, Texas, and find out what the story is. And then I sit with the man that's responsible for that particular job that's not working out for some reason. And I go back. And I tell Rocco, there's the guy that's working there is John something. And that John told me that the reason for this job was such and such. And while I was sitting in his office, he will call his secretary, call this man for me in Houston. And he will talk to him. John, Farouk here tells me that you have a great group and you're doing such and such. John, the thing that you're doing is the most important thing about the whole Apollo program. I want you to get your people together and tell them that they are going to fix that problem in 1 hour, in 2 hours, in 1 day, in no more than 2 days. And I want you to call me and tell me that you fixed it. We depend on you, John. So go ahead and do it. Hear me. I know. Because Farouk tells me that you're a great guy and you can fix that thing with your people. So he pumps him up, kind of, and he gets all the thing done. And in this picture, actually, I was giving him an award myself. Then there were 3 things. One called the Ranger program, to actually hit the surface of the moon so we know it is solid enough. There was another program that was called Lunar Orbiter, to take all kinds of pictures from lunar orbit so we can figure out what the features of the moon are like. And after that, there was the Surveyor program. And Surveyor program to actually land on the surface of the moon, so we're certain that, yes, indeed, a mission that we can send to the moon can actually land on the lunar surface. Then we had to work on the astronauts themselves, and one of the most important thing was to look at what is it that we're going to train the astronauts on. And he comes here, Gene Shoemaker. He was a geologist with the U.S. Geological Survey, and he became interested in the moon and started studying the moon from telescopes, and he became very familiar with the lunar surface features, and he actually was given a division within the U.S. Geological Survey called the Astrogeology Division in Flagstaff in Arizona State, and he started collecting a whole bunch of geologists that began to study the geology of the moon. So he and his group actually started working basically on the geology of the moon, and he is the one that worked on the idea of the fact that most of the round things on the surface of the moon, large and small, were the result of impacts of meteorite pieces. And so meteorites would hit the surface of the moon, create that round thing that is filled later by something or other. And he developed that from the Meteor crater in Arizona. It's a crater in Arizona that was actually formed by the meteorite hitting the surface of the Earth, and he studied the shock effects of the meteorite event on the rocks itself. So we trained astronauts in this area and so on. So it was his ideas that started all of these kinds of things. So we look at the moon and we see all of these round things, and Gene Shoemaker said, all of these round things that you see, large and small, are due to the impact of meteorites or large bodies, like the very large areas were very large planetary bodies, and the small, tiny, round craters are smaller meteorite impacts. So the impacts theory was responsible for making most of the surface of the features of the moon. So we had to convey this also to the astronauts, especially the ones that were going to look at the effects of shock on the rocks that they collect, but also on the astronauts that they fly around the moon. And my job was more than the teaching of the astronauts on the ground, but more of the teaching of the astronauts that will be flying around the moon and looking at the surface. And we had all kinds of pictures from lunar orbiter missions. And here is a lunar orbiter mission. I was pointing to features in the lunar photograph to one of the astronauts. It happens to be Stu Roosa, Apollo 14, but the details of the ground on the moon would be captured in lunar orbiter images, and we taught the astronauts this way by looking at these images. So these images were very important for us to train the astronauts before they went to the moon. And there came the launch time and successful missions, successful landings. There were 6 landings on the moon, so each mission 2 people would land on the moon and 2 people would actually remain, and 1 person would remain on orbit. So each mission had 3 astronauts. 1 remains in orbit, go around and around, and 2 would land on the surface to collect samples of the rock, of the lunar surface, and the one that stays in orbit takes pictures and makes observations. So the people that land on the surface of the moon would collect the rocks like these basalts. Most of the black areas are the basalts, volcanic rock is a basalt. And we study them and we figure them out. And now I will have 3 things that I would like you to know that relate to our Arab origin. The first one is the fact that Apollo 15 had a completely revised hardware. We were going to add a rover, so we had a Jeep to drive on the surface of the moon, and we're going to add a metric camera in the spacecraft that remains in lunar orbit. And that metric camera, its length was 7 feet, meaning that 2 meters, the camera was more than 2 meters long. So this was a huge change to the spacecraft and a huge changes to everywhere. So we were actually terrified, all of us, not just the astronauts, but we, the scientists, and everybody was saying that there were so many changes to the rocket and the spacecraft and the orbiting part of the spacecraft that maybe something would go wrong, because that was the beginning of Apollo mission 15, 16, and 17. So the last 3 missions had all of these changes done to them. The addition of the Jeep, addition of the cameras, addition of or orbiting instruments. So these were major changes, and we were afraid that, especially starting with Apollo 15, that there will be something would go wrong with all of these changes in the spacecraft. So the Apollo 15 astronauts were afraid of this, and we were joking and we're telling them that don't worry about it. And then finally, before the mission, I told them, I'm going to give you a page of the Quran that has the first surah of the Quran. It's additional protection for. They said, yes, absolutely, we'll need all the additional help that we need, because they took with them the Bible anyway. So I took it seriously, and they took all of my daughters, 4 daughters, and they said we'll pray, and we prayed at night, and we prayed for the safety for the astronauts, and they took that piece of paper, and it went with Apollo mission 15. And I would next was Apollo 15. One of the astronauts was a good friend of mine, and then I taught him how to speak a little bit of Arabic, and he said, yes, absolutely, I'm going to say that from one of the orbits while I'm roving around the moon. I will say that. And I thought that would be interesting, but because that would be during the mission, I thought I should tell the Apollo program about that. And the Apollo program director, Rocco Patron, who was a good friend of mine, he laughed his head off and he said, don't tell the guys in the mission control that he's going to do that. or when he does it, don't tell them that what it is. So let us see how they react to this. So I taught him, and he came, one revolution, he said, مرحبا أهل الأرض من Endeavor إليكم سلام. Hello, people of the earth, from Endeavor, greetings to you. And so the man that's in control of the communication with the astronauts said, what the hell is this? Hey, come, what's happening here? He's shouting at them because he thought something went wrong with the communications. And so Rocket Patrol told me, okay, tell them now. So I told them, no, guys, this is, he said a few words in Arabic, and this perfectly okay, and went on. So it's a very interesting thing that Arabic was said from the Apollo 15 mission from around the moon. So that's a very interesting thing. I thought that you guys should enjoy doing that. The last item that I would like to speak about is the fact that many of the lunar features before our time had Arabic names or names of Islamic scientists from the time of when the Arabs and the Islamic people were doing great work to humanity. So you can see here on the right that you, oops, on the doesn't want to stay. Okay, on the right here we have several names, and on the left there are 18 names of people: Ibn Sina, Al-Bayruni, Ibn Yunus, Al-Khwarizmi, Abu Al-Wifa, Mashallah, Al-Battani, Al-Hasan, Al-Faragani, Ibn Yunus. Ibn Yunus that he was a geographer in Egypt. He was the first map of Europe and a geographer in Cairo, Egypt. So, and Al-Khwarizmi is the one that started the algebra, and he called it algebra based on Jabir ibn Hayyan. And Al-Khwarizmi, his name became the word for algorithm. Now in computers work and in all the kinds of things that we do today with the computers, with the algorithm is a very important thing for us. And algorithm, the word is actually the name of Muhammad ibn Musa al-Khwarizmi, the Arab scientist or the Muslim scientist of that time. Meaning what? Meaning that people of our heritage had been at one time doing fantastic work, adding to the knowledge of humanity, very much like the people that we now know with doing all kinds of things in Western society or Western culture or Western civilization. So we were. And why were we? Because we accepted science as a most important component in our society. We respected scientists and held them above and beyond all of the other nonsense that was happening around them. And the scientists became very significant people in their society, and the leaders, our leaders, respected the scientists themselves, no matter where they came from or what their religion was. I'm reminded of the fact that in our society in the past, people would call the scientists for the great people, regardless of what they were or where they came from. They were Jews, they were Christians, they were Muslims of the East or the West or whatever. It didn't matter because they were scientists. We accept them and we look at them. And I'm reminded of the time in Spain of a mathematician called, or a great mathematician of Jewish heritage, who worked very well with who worked very well, and he was invited to Cairo by Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi when Salah ad-Din was in Egypt, and he invited him there, and he held him in his court, and he did all kinds of things to respect him. And the person, the scientist, became known everywhere in the Muslim world or the Arab world. And we were open-minded, and we were doing very well everywhere with everybody because we respected knowledge and science. and we read all the things that people wrote, because all the sciences is something that we can benefit from, naturally, because the first word in the Quran was Iqra. The first word that God wanted us to learn is to read, meaning acquire knowledge, because acquisition of knowledge is the main feature in humanity. So the more we acquire knowledge, the better we will be. And there is no question about it that those who acquire more knowledge and respect those who are knowledgeable are the ones that would lead the nation and the world. So I thank you very much for listening. And that's what all the slides that I wanted to show. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. El-Baz, for such an exciting journey through time. I see that we have here a few questions that the participant has asked. So we will go through a few of them and give you the chance to answer and have a discussion. So let's start with an easy one. It is by an anonymous attendee. He's asking, have you known well any of the astronauts? Which one have impacted you the most? And finally, is there a way to get in touch with you?
I have known all of the Apollo astronauts very well, because I was party to their education in the sciences and on the moon. I was part of the committee that selected sites to photograph on the surface of the moon. And therefore, we wanted to explain these kinds of we wanted to explain all of the features that the astronauts would want to photograph. So we wanted them to know why we want to photograph them, and which way to look at him, and which window to be standing, and which camera to use, and what film, and so on. So I was very heavily involved in the training of the astronauts, particularly in acquiring photographs, and so I know them all. The ones that I became really close with are Stuart Roosa from Apollo 14 and Alfred Worden, Apollo 15, who we became long-term friends. So they were friends until they died. They were close friends, very much like my childhood friends.
Okay, thank you. We have another question from Dr. Nasher Al-Bin Hassan. He says that you have established several key centers and organizations. From your personal experience, what are the key pillars of establishing a successful team?
Whatever I said about the success of the Apollo, the reasons for the success of the Apollo program apply. First of all, you have to say, what is it that we want to do? And how long we have to continue to do this until we reach our goals. What is the best person that can do that? Not, I'm going to appoint such and such because he is the husband of my cousin. No, you say, who is the best person that can do that job? Let us look around. Who is, and let them apply, and we'll sit down and test them, or ask them questions. How do you reach that goal? Tell us, and we'll select the very best. So this we have to depart from the way we're doing it, because the way we're doing it, we will stay where we are. We are not going to do something new, and we are not going to add to humanity the way things are being added to humanity today. All kinds of people, all kinds of countries, all kinds of cultures are adding knowledge to humanity, are adding all kinds of things to humanity, and we're not. And so to be able to add to humanity the way we used to, and we prove to the world that we are capable of doing so, we have to change our ways.
Okay, very interesting answer. Thank you for that, Dr. Farouk. Michael Phillips asks, did you advise on the filming of the series From the Earth to the Moon for the episode that showed you working with the astronauts on lunar geology?
Not at all. I had nothing to do with it. However, one of my students had a great deal to do with it. One of my students, Andy Chaikin, a Jewish American kid, he worked with me for a while at the Smithsonian Institution, and I taught him, and he became very well, and he wanted to do all kinds of things. And he went on and wrote a book about the moon. using astronaut stories and using all kinds of things, and that book actually became the basis for the television series. So my student was the one that became very heavily involved in that series.
Okay. We have a question from an anonymous attendee. They say a lot of great industrial and science-related technologies have been created and enhanced in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia since your last visit in 1980s. So what do you suggest to the young people of the country as a future majors and specialties when it comes to geoscience in general?
It doesn't really matter what field or in what area do you study, but it matters to take it seriously and tell yourself that I am going to be the best person in that field, period. Because that is the only way that you really succeed. It's not because I learned this and much and I took that kind of degree, or I took that down of honorary degree or any of this. It doesn't matter where did you study, in what school did you study, or what happened to you. It matters what you yourself do. It matters when you say, I am going to learn as much as I possibly can on this topic. And I'm going to acquire all the knowledge I can possibly can by reading as much as I can, by asking as many questions, by looking at all of the technical material from newspapers, magazines, books. To continue to read is essential. One of my daughters used to laugh at me to say, why are you still studying? Haven't you had your degree yet? What you already have your PhD. Why are you still studying? Because I study just as much as she does, and she's only in primary school, but I'm studying as much as she does because I still continue to. The day I put books down, the day I will lose my ability.
Well said. من المهدي إلى اللحد. Well said, Dr. Farouk. We have a question from Zaki Al-Awami. What is the one thing that is hindering scientific progress in the Arabic world, from your experience?
The lack of emphasis on excellence. We think that we're doing a job is to do a job and go there and do this and that. And take a minister, he goes to have his breakfast, and then he goes to his car and he's driven to the place in the ministry and he sits down and cuts it. In just a case of the fact that some of our leaders, meaning government people, the way they behave and the way they live and the way they think of themselves, they think they should sit down there and give orders to make sure that everything is moving well, that something is riding up. And many of them don't really know the reality of things. I was once in Egypt with a minister, and I was delighted to have known as a research center that belongs to that minister, that the research center was full of young people doing very well. And I thought I should really tell the minister to support them, and because here is a bunch of young kids that are doing great. I usually look at any place and look at the young people first, and this was a case. So I went to the minister and I said, such and such a center is fabulous, and the guys are very good. They are young and they're doing very good work. I think you should help them, talk to them and do so. And he asked me, where is that center? I said, what do you mean? He said, what ministry does it belong to? Where is it? So I said, okay. I stood up, went to around the desk, held his hand physically, said, please come up. He said, what do you mean? I said, please come with me. And I pulled him with me to the elevator. We were on the 7th floor and we went down to the 3rd floor. I went out of the 3rd floor and they said, here's the center. So here is a center of research. It belongs to him in the building where he is, and it's doing fantastic job, and he has no idea that it exists. And this tells me that yes, that ministry is not going to do well, because the minister is sitting giving orders and doing this and this and that, and nothing is happening down in the same building where he is. So this is just one example of saying that in the Arab world, we do not give credibility to the young people, the ones that are trying to do something, and we do not encourage them. So they actually go to work and go to the hours they are staying at work and leave, and they leave the work behind and they leave it at home too. And that is incredibly dangerous because you should not leave your work at all. Your work should go to bed with you.
Okay, Dr. Farouk, questions keeps coming up. The interest is skyrocketing. I see a lot of questions keep coming. We have a question from John Humphrey. He says, what were you doing at the time that President JFK announced the moon effort?
Oh, that was in the January 1st, 1960. I was just beginning to write up my master's thesis. I was in the US. I was at the University of Missouri School of Mines and Metallurgy. And I was writing my thesis because I got my master's in 1961. Yes. So I was in the US, right? I was starting my master's thesis in geology. Mining.
Okay. Which leads us to our next question, actually. It's from an anonymous attendee. They say, what are your personal views on the future of asteroid mining?
Yeah, I think that there is a great deal of us for things to learn. I cannot say now that it's going to be doing this and doing this and doing that. However, there is definitely a potential of doing all kinds of things from outer space, including the asteroids. Why? Because we believe that the asteroids were actually a planetary body that had been hit by another piece of rock from the universe, and it splattered into tiny little bits and pieces, but the pieces stayed in orbit around the sun. So we don't know from what was on the crest of that body that broken up, what was down in the mantle, what was in the core, so there may have been something that very different in all of these pieces, and some of these asteroids might be pure nickel. Some of the asteroids can be pure any element that we think of, and therefore they can be very interesting from the scientific point of view, from the chemical point of view, but also from the financial point of view, because this can be because we can even think about the moon in that term. Some of the lunar basalt, some of the volcanic rock on the moon, the volcanic rock basalt, some of it has very high percentage of titanium, 11% and 12%. On Earth, when we see a rock that is 4% titanium, is good enough for an ore from 4 to 7. But in the moon, there are some that are 11%. So it can be a great ore. So definitely all kinds of things can come from space if we continue to search and figure out what is there.
Okay, very interesting. We have a question from Jara. He says, do you think humankind or humans will make it to Mars anytime soon?
Not anytime soon, but we definitely will make it to Mars. There is no question about the fact that humans will be going to Mars. It's we have all kinds of missions right now, and we know for sure that Mars has water in the form of ice, a great deal of water, because it did have oceans in the past and the water evaporated. But since it had oceans, some of that water laid down, just like the groundwater in Saudi Arabia. But it will be, because it's cold, it froze. So much of their water on Mars would be frozen in ice. So definitely, and would allow human beings to live there and to survive and to mine some of the minerals and rocks on Mars.
Okay. We have a question from Cyril. He says, can you advise on the possible areas of enhancement looking at geoscience in the next 10 years?
Yes, things that help the environment, things that will give us better power and have better environmental living, because we have done a great deal of harm to the environment of the Earth, and we really should be thinking about the environment for our grandchildren. And the more we think about that, the better we do, and the more we do all the kinds of things that we would like to do, including energy, in the best possible way without adding harm to the environment, the better we will be.
Okay. Our next question actually relates to that from Zakir Awami. He says, which current scientific idea or breakthrough that you're personally most excited about?
There's no question about the potential, as far as I'm concerned, the potential of using solar energy. And I say this because one of our colleagues that was working with us during the Apollo years said, thought of this, and he said, my God, now that we have the satellites to go into Earth orbit, what if we make solar collectors in Earth orbit? And it can be a huge thing. We can make it like this, and then go into the orbit and flip like this, and be vast distances to collect solar energy, and it can be beamed in huge energy down to Earth. One beam to help light up a whole town. And every big city will have just one of these things on top of it. So there were all kinds of thinking at that time, and we know now that we certainly can do that. This is no question about the fact that yes, human beings can think of these wonderful things, and why not? And so maybe we have not really thought about the peaceful uses of space yet, but we should be thinking about more peaceful uses of space to serve humanity.
Okay. We have also a comment here from Mr. Misfir Zahrani, the Executive Director of the Exploration Organization at Saudi Aramco, thanking you for the enlightening information and looking forward to see you in the region during the GEO 2021. So we will be looking forward to see you.
Thank you.
Do you have some time, Dr. Farouk, for a few more questions? I see
Sure.
More questions are coming in.
Sure. Go ahead.
Then, okay, that's an interesting question from Mohammed Dhelan. He says, can you tell us how much research work has been done on acquiring energy from space?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. Dhelan is, I know the name, but I don't know which was Mohammed or which one. Yeah, but there is definitely a potential for that. We have not done that yet, but there is definitely for it. And that's why I mentioned earlier our colleague William Glazer, Glazar, that was working with us, and then he devoted himself to the idea of collecting solar energy in space and then beaming it down as micro beam. And so people have thought about it, but nobody has really done anything about it. And we certainly should think about that, because someday, maybe 50 years, maybe 100 years, maybe 200 years, oil will be run out from the Earth. So there has got to be other ways for us to think about what to do energy-wise and development-wise and money-wise and all of that. So there is no question about the fact that we should continue to think, and we should continue to plan and try things until someday when we need these things, they are available because science has provided the ideas to apply them.
Okay, very interesting. We also have a question from YouTube from Astrogate. They say, what comments do you have, Dr. El-Baz, about the new discovery of water on the moon? How is it stored in glass pebbles, and how easy is it to extract for human missions?
It is a very important question. We don't have all the answers for it, but it is really important, because during the Apollo program, we thought there would be absolutely no water on the moon at all, because the moon had not had any atmosphere whatsoever, and it has been subjected to solar wind that is very tough. Solar wind particles have been hitting the surface of the moon constantly, and they would have broken up any water molecules completely. So we knew that there will be absolutely no water on the moon. And there was even once during the Apollo missions, while they were circling the moon from the spacecraft that was circling the moon, tested something, and they found water, and they said, oh my God, water, there will be water on the moon. That instrument has sicked. And I suggested to them there couldn't be, this must have been urine that was ejected from the spacecraft, and that instrument picked this up, and that was a big thing. Farouk El-Baz says water on the moon, maybe urine. They used some papers, which is true, because we thought there would be absolutely no water. The solar wind has been, and it is true. the solar wind has been working on the surface of the moon, so there would be no water molecules whatsoever. However, there are places on the moon that are consistently in shadow. They never see the sun. And these are low areas in the polar regions, in the North Polar region and the Southern Polar region. If there is a crater, in the places that is in the shadow of the rim of the crater will be in permanent shadow, meaning they never see the solar rays and the solar particles at all. They will never see the sun, ever. Therefore, when the water was available, some of that water vapor could have been, and therefore it would be in ice. And it was tested by sending the Chinese spacecraft went to the southern polar region and punched something to see whether water, and indeed H2O was there, and in the areas that are permanently shadowed. So, and therefore there is water on the moon only in permanently shadowed areas, and these permanently shadowed areas are only in the north and the southern polar regions, more in the southern region, because there is a bigger crater in the southern region where there is more shadow. So yes, indeed, there would be a potential for water on the moon, but in these shadows. And therefore, if there was water on the moon, would it be then helpful if we can say that there are human beings that might live permanently or semi-permanently on the moon? Can they use that water if we can send something to the southern polar region to pick them up? And the answer is maybe, and therefore it should be studied.
That's a very interesting and intriguing concept, Dr. El-Baz. We also have a question from Carlos Rosilli. It's a bit of a long question, and it takes back memories. He's saying in an article 45 years ago in Saga, quotes your observations of spire structures in the moon and long shadows. Also another structure in Mare Chrismum and other enigmas that you could not solve back then. He's asking, have you solved them? And he's commenting saying that you said that not every discovery has been announced to the public.
No, that was in a book, actually, not me directly. And it was referred to the fact that I said that because of these long shadows and on the lunar surface from the lunar orbiter pictures, there are some features that we do not fully explain right now. When I said that, meaning that I will not fully explaining geologically, but we will, but we cannot now say what it is. So they overestimated that and said meaning that there must be man-made or made by other civilizations or made by former astronauts or made by people from other galaxies and things like that. No, there's absolutely no proof of any visitation to the Earth or the moon or the solar system of any outside people from outside of the solar system. There is absolutely nothing on the moon that can be described as something from previous habitation of other human beings. Absolutely. There are things that we cannot explain, and there will be, because there are things on the Earth that we cannot explain. Definitely features, and we cannot say exactly what it was or geologically say exactly this is the way it was made. So there are things in the universe that we cannot explain, and there will be people to continue to try to explain them, but none of that means that it is from some other civilization or some other people somewhere else in the universe. None.
Okay, it looks like we've come a long way in the past tens of years in our understanding of the moon and space, but we still have a long way to go as well.
Indeed, and that's good, because if we say that we understand everything about the universe, number one, I think we will be lying or deluding ourselves. Number two, it will make us respond badly, meaning to sit down and then don't try to understand more. So we should always consider the fact that we will actually never be able to figure out everything in the universe at all. The universe is vast. We understand a tiny amount, in maybe 1 or 2% of the universe that we understand now, and there is so much of it that we do not understand of what God has created, and therefore we should continue to be at it, continue to look, continue to study, continue to explore.
Okay, It looks like, Dr. Baz, this is all the time that we have for questions.
Okay.
This has been truly an interesting journey. Thank you, Professor Baz, for your great contribution and for the informative talk. This has been a truly unique and exciting session. It was our honor and our pleasure to have you virtually with us. Of course, we look forward to have you physically and welcoming you in the near future back in Dhahran, inshallah. And we thank you for sharing with us your valuable time and experience. Ladies and gentlemen, with that, we'd like to thank you all for joining us this evening, and we wish you a great evening. Thank you all for your time. With that, we conclude our webinar, and thank you, Dr. El-Baz.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your help.